The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
It's win or go home time, and the Washington Commanders aren't ready for a vacation yet.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
23-20 is your final score from Tampa, Florida, where the Washington Commanders have defeated the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the NFC South Division champion, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 4 times in a row, 5 years in a row, making the playoffs. So make no mistake about it. While the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have not been playing the most consistent football all year, certainly not playing the most consistent football entering the postseason, this is a team that is chock full of veterans, chock full of playoff experience. It's a coaching staff that has Super Bowl rings on it, that has playoff experience. This is a team that understands what the pressure of the wild card round really means. They know how to handle it. They know how to prepare in spite of it. And this Washington Commanders team that certainly has some of those people on their team as well. Guys like Bobby Wagner, for example, Zach Ertz, for example, but they're also led by a lot of young or somewhat inexperienced people. Cliff Kingsbury is a coach who really hasn't had a lot of playoff experience coming into the season. Jayden Daniels, obviously the rookie. Mikey Sainer still a rookie starting cornerback. So a lot of inexperience. And for me, the main takeaway from this game, other than the fact that we've got another week of football to prepare for, and we're going to the divisional round playoffs in Detroit to watch the Washington Commanders take on the Detroit Lions. What it really means to me is that the potential of this team, while we're all incredibly excited about the potential of this team, while we're all incredibly hyped up about the potential of this team, I don't know if even we fully grasp what the full potential of this team is. And of course, nobody is guaranteeing or going to go out on a limb and guarantee a Super Bowl championship this year. But I think as you watch this team continue to overcome odds, and it's not like people expected the Buccaneers to come in here and just wipe the floor with the Commanders and whoop their butts and all that stuff. The Washington Commanders were very much respected, I think, in most of the conversations I heard leading into the competition. So it's not like people took them for granted. But when you look at where they came from, where we were a year ago right now, where we were 8 months ago even right now, to where this Washington Commanders team stands, I think it's very, very impressive. And it kind of shows the resiliency. And yes, destiny. That's what the thumbnail says. It says divisional destiny. That is kind of a word that's been thrown around about this team. And look, 5 straight games, winning games on the final score. Not good for the blood pressure, not good for my sleep, right? I was sitting here going, man, we're going to have another primetime overtime game. I can't keep sleeping or lack of sleeping like this and stay healthy. So it's not good for all of those things, but man, is it good for the soul to see this team pull those things out? And I mean, look, I don't know about you guys sitting at home or if those of you who were in the stadium or wherever you were watching this game, when the Washington Commanders got their hands on the ball with 4:41 left in the game, 2020 game, I looked at it and said, man, this team is the ultimate 4-minute offense team. It's the ultimate 2-minute offense team. They are going to absolutely have the ability to come down here. And Cliff Kingsbury's going to have the ability to call the right plays. Jayden Daniels is going to have the ability to execute the right plays. And this Washington Commanders team is absolutely going to have themselves in a position to where I thought they would be able to take a go-ahead score with maybe a minute or so left on the clock, 30 seconds left on the clock, hopefully drain the Buccaneers of their timeouts in the process and really put Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a rough situation. But boy, was I wrong, because instead they completely dried out the Buccaneers of their timeouts. They drained the clock, and Zane Gonzalez, the fellow Sun Devil, making us proud, coming out here nailing. Well, I shouldn't say nailing the crossbar, nailing the goalpost, but making a game-winning field goal. And of course, just like that, it has to be with a little bit of drama, because why not? That is what this Washington Commanders season has been all about. Taking a look at our X Factor performances coming into the week, my X Factor in this game was linebacker Frankie Luvu, and Frankie Luvu certainly was all over the place on this field, certainly making some plays, 4 tackles combined, no sacks, no interceptions, no fumble recoveries, things like that. So stat box, again, not going to be the sexiest thing in the world, but Frankie Luvu certainly making his presence felt. Actually was the player that broke down the huddle before the team headed into the locker room for the last time before the game began. So Frankie Luvu certainly making an impact on the team, not making an impact on maybe your daily fantasy if you have an individual defensive player. Insider X Factors, Tyler Biotish, Marshawn Lattimore. Look, I think Marshawn Lattimore is going to walk out from this game. And as far as the one-on-one rivalry with Mike Evans is going to be concerned, this is going to be a chapter that he didn't necessarily win. Mike Evans certainly, I think, getting the better of him, certainly the scheme by Liam Cohen, doing some things to allow Mike Evans to get the better of Marshawn. But something that stood out about Marshawn Lattimore, not just the competitiveness, but also the way that the team kind of handled his workload. He was on the field, he was off the field, he would take extended breaks, and I think they really kind of were mindful, because remember the last time he came back to play for this team, he played all of the game, against the New Orleans Saints. They didn't really test him, they didn't really stress him at all, because they didn't target him, a single time in that game. But then the Philadelphia Eagles really came out and kind of went after him. He ends up aggravating that hamstring. I think the Washington Commanders kind of learned from that a little bit. So in this game, you don't see Marshawn out there for every single rep, every single time. They kind of brought him off the field and then brought him back in for third down situations, things like that. And, this is just kind of my assumption. I think that was a lot to do with trying to make sure that they didn't repeat those same mistakes, because you definitely want Marshawn Lattimore available against the Detroit Lions, against a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're going to need a guy like Marshawn Lattimore on the field. So I think certainly that had a part to do with it. But again, this defense just tends to play better when Marshawn is on the field. I can't really put my finger on it. Maybe it's a spiritual kind of a spirit animal type of situation. But whatever it is, the defense just plays better. And I think that outside of a handful of plays here tonight, the Washington Commanders certainly at least stepped up to the point where they were allowed to, or they were able to keep the Buccaneers offense from doing things that would let this game get out of hand. Look, we talked about it. Insiders talked about it before the game. Everybody came in this thing saying this is going to be a shootout. This is going to be a back and forth, high scoring affair. And what typically happens when everybody expects that to happen? A defensive affair. And 23-20 is not the most defense, not like 17-10, 14-10, something like that. But 23-20, 43 points, certainly under the 50.5 total point projection on FanDuel. So definitely more of a defensive battle, I think, than everybody expected, which tends to happen when everybody expects a battle. Tyler Biotish, look, that offensive line, man, I'll tell you, man, they had a task. The defensive line for the Buccaneers definitely getting early penetration. But I think as the game went on, whether it was fatigue from the defensive line side, because Washington Commanders owned the time of possession battle, especially in that second quarter, man. Like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense barely got on the field in the second quarter. For the game, the Washington Commanders end up holding the ball for over 35 minutes, while the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the ball for just 24 and a half minutes. So certainly that defense over there on the Tampa side getting a little bit worn down. Maybe that had a factor to do with it. But hey, look, that's all part of the strategy of playing football. And at the end of the day, that offensive line was able to do enough. Yes, there was a lot of pressures, and yes, people aren't going to be very happy about that. Jayden took off probably more than I think most people would be comfortable with. Talk about that here in just a little bit. But ultimately, only one sack in this game for the Buccaneers defense. And this is a defense that is predicated on getting pressure on the quarterback and causing havoc. So Levante David comes away with the only sack. And unfortunately, Levante finishes the game injured. And Levante, one of my favorite dudes in the NFL, shares an agent with Jayden Daniels. They've got a relationship. I know that Levante gave Jayden a jersey. They did their jersey swap thing. Levante gave Jayden his jersey after the game. So things like that, a lot of respect coming from the vet. So hope he gets to be okay. So I think Frankie, Lattimore, and Biotish all had an impact on this game, certainly. But I think the biggest X factor, honestly, turned out to be Dyami Brown. Look, Terry McLaurin did his thing, but you kind of look at Terry and say, look, we need Terry to do his thing. Jayden certainly did his thing. But we talk about X factors. We're talking about guys that kind of add that little extra something. And I think Dyami Brown did that.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
The Philadelphia Eagles are moving on to the divisional round after a 22-10 win.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast.
Philadelphia Eagles, they're staying alive for another week. 22-10, the final score over the Green Bay Packers. And again, this was not pretty. Reminded me a lot of that 2017 divisional round playoff win over the Atlanta Falcons. But again, like I said, a win certainly is a win in the playoffs, Gino. And I think although it's obvious that Jalen Hurts and Kellen Moore specifically need to be better if this team wants to win a championship, and that was definitely an alarming part of this game, At the same time, I kind of like that their first playoff game had to be a rock fight, a physical battle where your defense won it, because the defense is the inexperienced unit that I love that they carried you, especially Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. Like that 3rd and 3 stop from Carter that eventually forced the game-winning turnover, and Nolan Smith's 2 sacks today. I was wondering who was going to be that go-to guy in the postseason without Hassan Riddick. Nolan Smith was that guy. This defense set the tone from the start, and I do think that kind of win can really help you in the playoffs where things are just more intense. So that part of this game, I was so encouraged by.
There's been one consistent thing that I've said a few times over the last 17, 18 weeks or so, and it's that this defense is going to be the reason they would win a Super Bowl.
Isn't that unbelievable considering where we were at the start of the year with how young this team was and how new it was? I cannot believe they carried this into the playoffs.
One of the things in football is that coaching and getting the guys in the right scheme, when it all goes well, it turns into the most beautiful piece of choreography. And even when a Nakobe Dean goes out, which that's tough, man.
Big
I mean,
blow.
After a huge season, or
he was amazing today, Gino. I thought,
dude.
He looked so
the blitz,
good in the first half.
Getting downhill, like he's physical, like he does all season long, and he goes down. That's tough. But the young guys, once again, Lou, celebrate your boy,
the curse is
Quinyon
over.
Mitchell, getting
over.
number one. He was gonna get one, and that was number 3 of the day for Jordan Love. And we talked one of the last times. I know it's been a bit. We've been Lou on vacation, me down at CGS, but we're back here. One of the last times we talked, Lou, right when I think we found out about the Green Bay game.
Yeah.
We talked about how we were going to attack this and how would you like them to attack it. And you mentioned you kind of want to get into the game plan of the A.J. Brown and the Devontae Smith.
Yeah.
I kept saying, I think it starts with Saquon Barkley. And I texted multiple people, my cousins, my friends that are all Packer fans, and I said, it's either going to be the Wild Wild West and there's going to be 1 billion points scored, or it is going to be an absolute pick up rocks, ground and pound. It might not pop for an explosive run, but you got to be tougher, longer. And the Eagles, once again, Lou, they played clean football and took care of the ball.
Yeah.
They took the ball away. They got pressure on Jordan Love. The couple sacks that Jalen Hurts got into, him holding on to the ball too long, those sacks on Jordan Love, that's Nolan Smith coming into his own and being the player that they drafted last year because he's in a Fangio scheme.
I can't believe how good Nolan Smith has looked. I mean, he was, I think, the best player on the field today. I mean, every single play.
You have an argument for him, without a doubt, Lou.
Yeah, 2 sacks, 4 pressures, was amazing against the run. Again, I thought Jalen Carter, I said before the game, I want this to be one of those games where Jalen Carter shows I'm a future Hall of Fame talent. And when it mattered most, I thought he did that. But Nolan Smith specifically was everywhere. And I like that you mentioned the physicality part. I love how tough and physical they, from the jump, looked. Like Oren Burks, the first play of the game, pops out the ball on a forced fumble on the kick return. That's why I'm saying, obviously, the offense, especially Jalen Hurts and Kellen Moore today, I was not happy with that performance. It needs to be better if you're going to beat a team like the Lions eventually, or heck, if you get to the Super Bowl and you got to play a Pat Mahomes or a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson.
Of course.
But I like that in the postseason when things get, again, the space gets tighter, things get tougher, that you were the tougher team and you were dictating terms. You were being the hunter, the bully, because that's not what you looked like last year in the postseason. So I thought that was just from all 3 levels, the secondary, the linebackers, the defensive line, that is who this team was today. And I think that's a really important kind of win in the postseason.
You can get nitpicky with Jalen Hurts for sure.
Yeah, I don't want
going to throw a little bit.
I think he was bad today. I think that's fair to say.
Absolutely. After that first drive, it went downhill quickly. He definitely hasn't played in a couple weeks. Kellen Moore is my bigger concern. This has been a consistent thing, and I think the A.J. Brown sideline thing is it's not, I don't think we need to start drama
what'd you
about
think
it,
of
but
that? What'd you think about the book?
It's going to be the greatest meme of all time. I
know, and again,
it's
I don't think he
unbelievable.
was doing it with any malice, but
No.
A.J. Brown, I never want you to get mad again when people run with certain headlines, because you're just, it's a funny meme, but come on, man, you're reading a book when you have 1 catch for 10 yards. Read the room. I don't know. I mean, ridiculous.
But at the end, when Saquon gets his
Saquon
first
was
win,
unbelievable today.
and he's
oh my gosh,
and he's going nuts. AJ Brown was right on
Saquon,
his shoulder,
by the way, another
living it
meme
up.
today. There was multiple memes from this game. Saquon pointing to the
The
first
greatest
down.
Eagle meme game of
It
all
might be
time,
the most
arguably.
meme-filled playoff game I've ever seen. Yeah.
Just what really good individual performances, though, man.
There's so
Darius Slay, his entire career, and it's one of those quirks. It's like Kirk Cousins in prime time, Darius Slay against Green Bay. He's been in situations against the Green Bay Packers that were less than fortuitous. Today, that's why he is the player he is. That interception he had,
He ran the route for Wicks. It was just perfect.
that is stuff you cannot teach that, man. That is natural, inherent ability, and it was him just continuing off of a bad season last year because of injuries, ups and downs, solidifying that one side. While the young bull on the other side, Quinyon Mitchell, is balling
How
out.
cool
and
was it that he got his first pick in the playoffs to seal the win? I mean, that's just
on a day that so does Darius Slay,
Yeah.
who he said was his eye. I mean, talk about a story in football,
so
man. I
cool.
mean, you can't write that.
And Q, by the way, Gino too. Like I thought another drive where they missed the field goal in the red zone. He gave up a bad DPI call and then 2 perfect coverage reps right after, back-to-back forced incompletions.
yeah, he recovered really well.
Like the
Doesn't
young
stay
guys
in his
today,
head at all, man.
Exactly. When the young guys made a mistake today, even Cooper DeJean a couple times, they bounced right back. Like
Yes.
I was, again,
They
the
got
defense has been doing
dogs. They
this-
got guys that are like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't get that one. I'm
I
going
was
to the
blown
next one.
away
On to
by-
the next one. It was every play
Yeah.
that the offense is one thing, and we're definitely going to talk about the offensive
Yes.
performance, right? And I think it has to do more with the game plan than anything. And we'll talk about the rust, and we could go into the tape and all that as we continue to look at it. But the game plan to have known that the goal before the season was to host multiple playoff games at home. And why would you want to host multiple playoff games at home in Philadelphia specifically? Let's go back years. How many times is it brick cold? I mean, you go back to the Atlanta game and like all these games throughout the playoffs where it's just being tougher in a gritty environment where there might be superstars on the other side that might make plays, but we're not going to make the explosive mistakes. We're not going to allow them to have these deep shots. 10 points
And
allowed.
you're the youngest
once
defense
again.
in football. Like that's what I want to keep highlighting. They're
Yes.
doing this as the youngest
They're
unit.
they
Most
look
of
like a
these guys
veteran
haven't been
sound
here.
defense. Exactly, man. That's the point you have to continue to harp on is that the defense looks so fantastic and defense wins championships. If a defense holds a team to 10 points, yes, it's a banged up Packer team. Yes, Jordan Love helped you out a bit. Yes, the first play of the game, special teams, why we harp on it and harp on it and harp on it. You still were the tougher, better team.
And
when
they
you
still
go
had
back
a
and
ton
look
of
at the
talent.
tape.
Like Green Bay had
Exactly.
a ton of guys out there where it doesn't negate the defensive
I mean,
performance.
Jayden Reed was making play. That Josh Jacob run is, I mean, that's
Jacobs was incredible today.
that's a top 10 run of the season in my opinion, man.
But again,
they threw their shots, but the Eagles
They
threw
did.
harder shots back at them for
And,
sure.
and when you get 3 turnovers from the defense, a 4th from
Yes.
special teams, like that is a recipe where if the offense
they weren't
can
letting the
get
Atlanta
going,
thing happen again. I got
No.
that feeling a little.
I
Did you
was
get that?
too. I got
you got
it.
that feeling?
That's
It
why
was
the
like,
minute the show started, I'm like, this game reminded me so much of the first game in 2017 against Atlanta. But I
Yeah.
think that's a good first test. Like you kind of want to get that game under your belt. The offense, obviously, you need to take advantage of these turnovers. They had 0 points from that pick. Zach Bond, an amazing game today, had to take over play calling too when Nakobe Dean went down. His pick, he read Jordan Love to a T. I mean, Vic Fangio was using him everywhere today on the
freaking
edge.
player. What a player,
Yeah,
dude.
so, I mean, this defense, to have that kind of performance, again, the offense needs to take advantage of it, but I love that for 4 quarters, they were saying, we've got you, like, we're going to win this. I mean, how many red zone stops? I thought, here comes the touchdown that flips the field, that flips the game. They hold them to a field goal attempt, or they get a turnover. I was just so impressed. So, yeah, we're going to get into the passing game problems and how the offense can be better. But, like,
Can I
the
say
first,
one more thing on the run game?
No,
Lou?
of course, yeah.
I think it's going to be a really cool exercise when you can get the all 22 and look at the tape from this game and then go back to look at when they were playing in the Southern Hemisphere and how different that defense has just been molded by Vic Fangio in a matter of 4 months. They've become grown men in the blink of an eye, and not just guys that are just got like legitimate good football. Like, we didn't even talk about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson having one of his, ball hawk type of
Milton
picks.
Williams was consistently in the backfield today.
Dude, every single player on defense made a play where you're like, yep, you contributed to the ball game, and you did it in the best way possible.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it shouldn't surprise you, though, even though they're the youngest defense in football, Nolan Smith was on a team that won back-to-back national championships. So did Jordan Davis. So did Jalen Carter. So did
Keep
Nakobe
it simple,
Dean.
stupid. Just draft the guys that play
Yeah.
at good football
So
schools and big games. Yep.
It really doesn't surprise me, even though they're inexperienced, and a lot of these guys have been role players for playoff teams in the past or haven't been here at all, that they did this, because this is the makeup, the blueprint of this defense. And I think the identity of this football team is they're the hunters right now, and they're going to be the tougher team for 4 quarters.
From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. The monster matchup of the divisional round is Bills-Ravens. Each team dominated their wild card game, so the line is probably going to see some movement over the next week. Right now, FanDuel has the Bills favored at home by 1.5. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
1 down, 3 to go.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast.
The Buffalo Bills defeated the Denver Broncos 31-7 and advance to the divisional round of the playoffs. We got the result and the performance I was hoping to see. Defense showed up, the run game was dominant, and Josh Allen did special things. So many good things from this game. Can't wait to break it all down for you here today on this episode. We'll talk about things I liked. We'll get into things I didn't like. Not a lot there. We'll recap my predictions, and we'll briefly touch on the Bills' divisional round opponent, the Baltimore Ravens. Let's start with things I liked on offense, and of course, I'm starting with the run game. If you listened to the podcast last week, you knew that I had some confidence in the Bills being able to run the ball against Denver, and they were terrific. Over 200 rushing yards. They dictated this game because of how they ran the football. The catalyst, James Cook. 22 carries, 120 yards, over 5 yards per carry, had a touchdown run. And I thought there were 2 runs in particular that, as they happened, my confidence in the Bills being able to control the game really grew. The first one was a first down run. I think James got 4 or 5 yards. And then Deion Dawkins and company just moves James Cook like another 10 yards. And that was like a tone-setting moment in the game. Then his touchdown run, terrific run. He was contacted at about the 2.5, 3 yard line. He finished strong through contact, carried that linebacker in and scored. And when James is running with that type of conviction, with that type of, urgency through contact, things are good. And James Cook, certainly the catalyst for this outstanding day running the football for the Buffalo Bills. Love seeing Josh Allen's involvement in the run game, 8 carries for 46 yards. You could tell that Denver was nervous about that component for their defense. Was, how do they bottle up Josh Allen? And I thought they had the wrong idea. They're a good defense. They're an aggressive defense. They were really, really, really careful. And I think it's okay to be cautious at times, but their overall plan was too cautious. It flew in the face of what got them to that moment, and the Bills were able to take advantage. Josh Allen on the ground, 8 carries, 46 yards. And then Ty Johnson, 9 carries for 44 yards as well. Your top 3 ball carriers, Cook, Allen, Johnson, 39 rushes, 210 yards. That's over 5 yards per carry, 5.3 yards per carry. Of course, you had 1 run for Ray Davis for 3 yards, and then 3 Mitchell Trubisky kneel downs to get to the total rushing production that you probably look at in the box score. But I thought the backs, all of them, of course, James Cook, the headliner, physical, decisive running. The offensive line was fantastic, moving bodies out of the way, controlling, resetting the line of scrimmage, creating displacement. And then you also have to tip your hat to the ancillary blockers for this team. guys like Dawson Knox, Alec Anderson. The Bills ran 6 offensive linemen a ton. I'm certain over 20% of snaps. Alec Anderson's out there as that utility blocker. Reggie Gilliam, Mac Hollins does a great job, even Khalil Shakir. So you have rushing output like that. Of course, the ball carriers are going to get the shine. The O-line, the scheme, the ancillary blockers as well were terrific. How about this passing game? How about Josh Allen? 20 of 26, 272 yards, 2 touchdowns passing. That's 135.4 rating. And I really enjoyed the passing game for the most part, especially the deep stuff. Josh Allen, 4 of 4 on throws, 20 yards or more down the field for 139 yards, 2 touchdowns. They handled the blitz extremely well. We knew that Denver would blitz. Josh Allen had a success rate of 75% when blitzed against the Broncos. That comes courtesy of the 33rd team. That's the 4th highest success rate by any quarterback in a playoff game with 10 or more dropbacks since 2000. Josh Allen ranking 4th out of 140 performances in terms of playoff success rate against the blitz. Josh has been great against the blitz all year long. That continued against Denver when he needed to be great against the blitz. And so Josh Allen, obviously terrific as a runner, a lot of production throwing the football, particularly down the field, beating the blitz. But how about the receivers? I thought the receivers in this game just made some great plays. And credit to Joe Brady. I thought he was in his bag throughout this game. If you want Joe Brady to be your head coach, I think this is one heck of a resume game for him to show what he did against, or what he was able to draw up against, a top-tier defense like Denver. But these receivers really made some plays. I mean, the insane completion to Ty Johnson. Obviously, Josh Allen, great job extending the play, great throw. But on that 4th down for the Bills to be able to come through with the touchdown in that spot, that was a big moment in that game that I think it's probably the moment that blew the thing wide open. So for as dominant as the Bills were in this game, it was fairly tightly contested for, 70% of the game. And that was kind of the game-breaking moment. And just an unbelievable catch by Ty Johnson, one that you'll always remember, right? I mean, you think about degree of difficulty plays, that's high up there. To be able to navigate that back line like he did, like that 1 foot looked like it was going to go out of bounds, and then it just kind of pops up at the right time. He makes the catch. I mean, just an unbelievable play. Curtis Samuel, big-time touchdown catch. He comes free on that over route for a touchdown. He beat Patrick Surtain. Great call out of the quarter. First play of the 4th quarter, you kind of have an opportunity to talk things out and figure out what you want to run. Great play call by Joe Brady. Great throw. Great catch by Curtis Samuel. And, of course, a great finish to find pay dirt. Dalton Kincaid. A big catch down the field. Maybe it wasn't, but it's a catch. The Bills got up, very situationally aware, ran a play. It counts. Khalil Shakir, I mean, huge yards after catch plays. Huge. Couple of times being able to get the Bills into a 3rd and manageable after being in a 2nd and long. Shakir's just such a competitive football player that's so good after the catch. He's so hard to tackle. He's a dog. How about Dawson Knox coming through with some production in this game? And I thought that was kind of the cast of characters that needed to be the catalysts in the passing game. This wasn't a good matchup for the Bills' outside receivers in Keon Coleman and, Amari Cooper and Mac Hollins. Mac had the nice 19-yard catch. Coleman had a catch, right? He had the 2-point conversion. Cooper had a couple of short catches, but this wasn't about them. This wasn't their game to really go off. It wasn't a good matchup. But what that did mean is it was a good matchup for the backs, the tight ends, the slot players, and I thought the Bills had the exact right plan to attack this Denver defense. And boy, did they find a lot of production that's uncommon to achieve against Denver. Kind of crazy to think the Bills only had 8 drives. There was only 8 drives in this game by both teams. You think about a football game, it's 10, 11, 12 possessions each. 8. And on those 8 drives, the Bills get 31 points, 26 first downs. They go 10 of 17 on possession downs. So that's 3rd and 4th down conversion opportunities. 471 yards on 8 drives, 210 rushing, 6.5 yards per play. You had the ball. You possessed the ball for 42 of 60 minutes in the ball game. Talk about dictating terms. And I think it all starts with that rushing output. The passing game was opportunistic, but pretty quiet for a good portion of that game. Then you started to see those game-breaking plays. The Ty Johnson play, the Curtis Samuel play, the Kincaid play. It's a beautiful recipe. Absolutely beautiful recipe. 31 points on the much celebrated Denver defense.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.